He found it the way he found most things, by watching and being quiet and letting the land tell him what he was looking at. The depression was 12 feet across, a subtle bowl in the lava surface that you would walk past 100 times without registering. But at dawn, when the air was cold and still, there was something coming from it, a faint breath of cold air rising from a crack in the basalt at the depression's center, and around that crack, dark with stored moisture, grew a ring of plants that had no business being there. Maidenhair fern, small and perfect and absolutely certain that there was water below. Ely lay on his stomach at the edge of the crack and listened. "There's something down there," he said. "How do you know? It sounds different, not like regular rock quiet, like there's more space than there should be." He sat up. His hands were dark with volcanic soil. "Grandfather was right. We started digging. I want to tell you that it was romantic, that it felt like discovery, like adventure, like the beginning of something epic. But the truth is that the first 3 weeks of digging through sealed basalt with tools bought at a hardware store in Saddle Creek were simply painful. My hands blistered and then hardened and then blistered again. Ely was not strong enough yet for the heavy work, but he was precise, and he could read the rock in a way that still startled me. He would point at a seam in the lava surface and say, quietly, "There, that's where it wants to break," and he was right, every time. Desmond showed us techniques he had learned from 30 years of working volcanic terrain, how to find the natural fracture lines, how to use the rock's own geometry against it instead of fighting the surface straight on, how to read the subtle color changes that indicated where the lava had cooled unevenly and left weakness below. We also read our grandfather's notebooks, all 22 years of them, organized by year and filled with the particular handwriting of a man who had been talking to no one but himself for a very long time. Temperature readings, soil samples, water table measurements from wells throughout the valley, detailed observations of vegetation patterns that revealed the invisible presence of water below. He had been meticulous. He had been patient in a way that I found almost difficult to comprehend. 22 years of measuring and mapping and recording and believing, with no one to share any of it with, and the full awareness that most of the people in the valley thought he was a harmless eccentric who had wasted his retirement on a worthless lava field. He had believed anyway. I read those notebooks at night by lamplight, Ely asleep beside me, the lava field quiet outside. And slowly, page by page, I came to understand that our grandfather had not been a man who had forgotten about us. He had been a man who had chosen, at an enormous cost to himself, to protect us by keeping us invisible, and who had spent every day of that protection building something to give us when it was finally safe. The man from Hollander Resource Group appeared in the 4th week. His name was Gary Pittman, and he was the kind of person who dressed for a conversation the way other people dress for a performance. Pressed shirt, clean boots, a smile deployed with the precision of a tool. He came to the cabin on a Tuesday morning and knocked on the door like a neighbor making a social call. "Miss Calloway," he said, "I heard you were settling in. I wanted to introduce myself personally." He extended his hand. I shook it because not shaking it would have required energy I was conserving for other things. "Hollander has a long-standing interest in this parcel. We've been respectfully waiting while the estate was sorted out. Our offer of $3,000 is less than the equipment in your truck," I said. He smiled. "I understand you might feel that way. These things are always personal. But I want to be straightforward with you. This is volcanic terrain. The assessment is accurate. There is no viable agricultural use, no timber value, no water access. What Hollander sees here is an opportunity for mineral survey and potentially some limited extraction of obsidian-grade basalt, which is a modest market but consistent." "Did you survey below the lava field?" I asked. His smile stayed in place. "The surface assessment is consistent with the geological record for this region." "That's not what I asked." A brief pause. Just brief enough to be interesting. "A subsurface survey would require considerable investment for uncertain return." Or you already know what's down there." He looked at me for a moment. Then he looked at Eli, who was standing in the cabin doorway behind me, arms folded, watching with the focused calm of someone who is counting things. Then he looked back at me. "Our offer is $3,000, he said. "I could go as high as 4, given the circumstances. I think that's generous." "The land's not for sale," I said. He nodded slowly. He was not surprised. He had not come here expecting to buy the land this morning. He had come to see what he was dealing with. "My door's always open," he said. He walked back to his truck. Before he got in, he turned. "Volcanic terrain can be treacherous," he said, "especially for people who aren't familiar with it. Lava tubes are unstable. Cave-ins happen." He got in the truck. "Be careful." That night, I moved our grandfather's notebooks to the root cellar. Let us know in the comments from which part of the world you are watching this video. If you're enjoying our videos, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The breakthrough came on a morning in November, 2 months after we had arrived. Ely and I had been working the excavation for 3 weeks. We had followed the fracture line down 6 feet, then 8, then 10. The air rising from below had grown progressively colder and more damp. The smell had changed. Not the dry mineral smell of surface rock, something ancient, something that had been sealed away from sunlight for longer than humans had been in this valley. On a Tuesday morning, Eli was working the chisel along a seam when the rock gave way without warning and a piece of basalt the size of a dinner plate dropped inward rather than outward. Where it had been was a hole, not large, not small, dark beyond the reach of our flashlights. Cold air poured out of it in a steady, gentle, unmistakable current. Ely lowered his face to the opening and listened. He was quiet for so long that I thought something had gone wrong. Then he looked up at me. His expression was something I had no word for. Quiet and enormous, like a landscape seen from a great distance. "Running water," he said. "Maren, there's running water." I knelt beside him and put my ear to the opening. It was there, faint and constant and utterly certain of itself. The sound of water that had been flowing in the dark for 10,000 years, indifferent to the surface world and the people on it and the arguments about whether it existed. It existed. I sat back on my heels in the cold November morning, with volcanic soil on my hands and tears running down my face that I did not bother wiping because there was no one to see them except Eli, and Eli already understood. "He was right," Eli said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "He was right," I agreed. It took another month to widen the opening safely. We worked slowly, carefully, with Desmond guiding every step. The lava tube beneath was larger than we had anticipated. 40 feet down from the surface, the tube opened into a cavern that took my flashlight beam and swallowed it before it found the far wall. The stream moved along the cavern floor in a channel it had carved over centuries, clear and cold and constant. I cupped my hands and drank, and the water tasted of clean darkness and deep stone, and something that I can only describe as time. Desmond estimated the flow rate while Eli moved his flashlight slowly across the walls, studying the formations. The stalactites hanging from the ceiling, the mineral deposits along the stream bed, the places where the lava tube had collapsed and reformed over millennia into something no human eye had seen before us. "How much water?" I asked. Desmond shook his head slowly. "More than I can calculate. This isn't a stream. This is the outflow from something much larger. The way your grandfather described it, the aquifer sits beneath the entire basin. This is just where it gets close enough to the surface to emerge." He was quiet for a moment. "The valley wells are pulling from 20-30 feet down. This is 40 feet deeper than that, and the pressure is flowing up. It's artesian. It will push itself to the surface if you give it a channel. How long will it last? As long as that mountain stands. The whole eastern face feeds into this. Every rainstorm for the past 10,000 years." He looked at me. "Your grandfather was not wrong. Not about any of it. I looked at the water moving in the dark, patient and unhurried and absolutely sure of itself. Outside, Saddle Creek was going about its November. People were preparing for winter, filling woodsheds, covering gardens, checking well pumps with the slightly anxious attention of people who already knew, somewhere beneath their daily awareness, that the water was lower than it used to be. They did not know what was beneath the lava field yet. They would. The summer of the following year was the driest on record. It did not happen suddenly. It happened the way important things often happen, gradually and then all at once. May was dry. June was drier. By July, the creek through town had narrowed to a thread. By August, the thread had stopped. The wells began to fail in sequence. The Madrigal family's pump went first. Their well was the shallowest, 30 feet, and it had always been the first to struggle in dry summers, but it had always recovered. This time it did not. They hauled water from town for 2 weeks before the town well itself began to give signs of stress. The Okonkwo farm lost their irrigation water in August. 40 acres of vegetable crops that supplied 3 local restaurants and the farmers market. Gone. They could not finish the harvest. By September, the Saddle Creek Water Authority had implemented voluntary rationing that became less voluntary by the week. Ailey tracked all of it. He had started keeping a notebook of his own, observations written in the same careful columns as our grandfathers, daily measurements of the stream flow from our aquifer alongside notes about the weather and the condition of the valley farms he could see from the ridge. He was 16 now, and he had grown 3 inches since we arrived and had opinions about hydrology that regularly surprised Desmond. "They're going to need to ask," he said one evening in September. We were sitting on the ridge watching the sunset turn the lava field shades of copper and deep red. "It's just a question of when." "I know," I said. "Are we ready?" I thought about that. We had spent months preparing for exactly this moment. We had, with Desmond's help, built a series of stone channels from the cavern entrance down the slope of the property, allowing the artesian flow to emerge and run in controlled streams that we had used to irrigate our own garden through the drought. We had built a collection basin at the base of the property, large enough to supply water to vehicles. We had tested the water quality at our own expense and then twice more with independent labs, and confirmed what our grandfather's research had predicted. It was clean. It was mineral-rich. It was some of the best quality groundwater in the county. We were ready. "Yes," I said. The first person came on a Wednesday. It was Hannah Okonkwo, a woman in her 50s who had been farming in Saddle Creek for 23 years and who had the particular dignity of someone who has worked very hard her whole life and is not accustomed to asking for help. She drove her truck up to the edge of the property and stopped. She sat in the cab for a long moment. Then she got out. She had 6 empty canisters in the truck bed. She did not look at me directly at first. She looked at the stone channel and the water running in it, and the collection basin, and the fact that in the middle of the worst drought in recorded local history, water was moving steadily down a slope on land that everyone had written off as worthless. "I heard you found something," she said. "My grandfather found it," I said. "We just opened it up." She looked at me then. Something complicated moved across her face. "How much can you spare?" "As much as you need," I said. "Come back whenever. The flow doesn't stop." She filled her canisters. When she was finished, she stood at the basin for a moment looking at the water. "Caulfield Reyes," she said. "I knew him, not well. He came to the farmer's market sometimes, bought vegetables. People thought he was strange. All that time on the lava field." She paused. I never thought to ask him what he was doing there. "He was finding this," I said. She nodded once. Then she loaded her canisters into the truck and drove away. By the following week, there were 12 families coming to the basin. By the end of September, 31, they came with trucks and wheelbarrows and every kind of container that would hold water. They came early in the morning and late in the afternoon. They came with their children, who stared at the stone channels with wide eyes, and they came with their elders, who sometimes stopped and looked at the lava field around them with expressions I could not entirely read. We did not charge. We set no conditions except a simple one, suggested by Eli, that people take what they needed and not more. Almost everyone honored it. Gary Pittman came in early October. He came alone this time, without the performance of the pressed shirt and the deployed smile. He came on a Saturday morning and stood at the basin for a while, watching the water flow, watching the line of vehicles pulling away with their full containers. Then he walked over to where I was standing. "You found it," he said. "We found it." He was quiet for a moment. "What's it worth, do you think, if you were going to put a number on it?" "We're not putting a number on it." He looked at me. "The company I work for has been trying to acquire this land for 12 years. My employers are not people who accept permanent no." "I know," I said, "but I'm not interested in what they accept. I'm interested in what's right." He studied me for a moment. "You're very young," he said, not unkindly, almost like an observation. "Yes," I said. "My grandfather was young when he started this. He spent 22 years on this land proving something that people like your company told him wasn't there. He didn't live to see the end of it, so I am finishing it for him. And I need you to understand that this aquifer is going to be formally documented, legally protected, and connected to a community water trust by the end of this year. So whatever your company had in mind for this land, they should redirect their attention elsewhere." Gary Pittman looked at the water for a long time. Something shifted in his face. I could not tell what it was. Maybe the particular tiredness that comes from spending years acquiring things and realizing that the acquiring was all there was. "Hollander was going to cap the aquifer," he said finally. "Extract for bottling operations. No local benefit. The water would have left the valley entirely." I said nothing. "Your grandfather knew that," he said. "That's why he wouldn't sell." "Yes," I said. "I know." He nodded. He walked back to his car. He sat in it for a while before he drove away. We never heard from Hollander Resource Group again. The Saddle Creek Water Cooperative was established the following spring. It took 4 months of meetings and legal work and negotiations with the County Water Authority and a conservation attorney from Portland named Rhea Sung, who had read about the aquifer in the county filing and driven out to see it herself. She was brisk and methodical and had a gift for translating the complicated into the plain, and she became, over those months, the closest thing to a mentor I had encountered outside a book. The cooperative gave us formal legal protection for the aquifer. It established community access and governance so the water would never be privately extracted or sold. It connected the flow to a distribution system that, within 18 months, supplied clean water to the entire Saddle Creek Basin. We served on the cooperative board. We did not lead it. That was not what we wanted. What we wanted was to tend the land, to continue our grandfather's research, to understand more completely what lay beneath the lava field and what it meant for the valley's long-term water security. Eli enrolled in the regional high school that fall, and began, for the first time in his life, to have teachers who recognized what they were looking at. His earth science teacher, a man named Barros, called me after the first week to tell me that Eli had corrected a passage in the textbook and had been right. "He has a gift," Barros said. "I know," I said. Eli grew into himself in Saddle Creek in the way that plants grow when you finally give them enough water and light. Not quickly, not dramatically, but with the particular certainty of something that has found its correct conditions. He made friends. He spent hours on the lava field, mapping formations, adding to our grandfather's notebooks in his own hand. He began corresponding with a geology professor at the state university who had heard about the aquifer and wanted to study it. The county awarded a posthumous citation to Caulfield Reyes the following year. The ceremony was small, and the words were adequate, and none of them quite captured what I wanted to say, which was something too large and too complicated for an official occasion. Something about faith and patience and the particular courage of continuing to believe in something when all the evidence available to observers is that you are simply a person sitting alone on a worthless piece of ground. I kept what I wanted to say for a different kind of occasion, for the letter I wrote to him that winter, sitting at his table in the cabin that was now ours, the lava field quiet outside, the aquifer flowing below in the dark. I told him we had found it. I told him the valley had water. I told him about Ely and his notebooks and the geology professor and the way the Okonkwo farm had come back in the spring like nothing had ever happened. I told him about Desmond, who had started teaching Ely to read rock the way he had taught me, and about Cecily at the diner who had put a small photo of him on the wall behind the counter and would not explain it except to say he had been a regular and the coffee had never been good enough for him. I told him I understood why he had done what he did, not without grief, not without the particular ache of all those years when we did not know he existed and he could not tell us, but with the clarity that comes when you have stood inside someone else's story long enough to understand it from the inside. He had loved us in the only way he believed would keep us safe, and then he had spent every year of that love building something to give us when it was finally safe to give it. The lava field, the aquifer, the notebooks, the cabin with its single window and its wood stove and its 22 years of careful solitary research. He had left us a letter in the language of stone and water, and it had taken us this long to learn to read it. There is a spring on the eastern edge of the property now where the artesian flow reaches the surface naturally without any assistance from our channels. A small stone basin, built by Ely and Desmond over the course of a summer, marks the spot. On the basin wall, Ely carved a sentence. He chose it himself and spent 2 evenings getting the letters right. What they called worthless was everything we needed. The valley is green this year. The wells are full. The Okonkwo farm harvested its best season. Children who grew up not knowing their taps might go dry have already forgotten to think about it, which is exactly how it should be. Eli is 18 now. He has been accepted to study geology at the State University. He plans to come back when he is finished. He plans to continue the research our grandfather started. He plans to map every fracture and channel and cavern of the aquifer, to understand it completely, to publish the findings so that the knowledge cannot be lost or suppressed or bought and sealed away. He told me this on the ridge above the lava field on the last evening before he left for school. The sun was going down behind the mountains. The lava field below us was darkening from rust to black, the stone holding the day's heat long after the air had turned cold. He started something, Eli said. I want to finish it. He would have been proud of you, I said. Eli was quiet for a moment, the way he still got sometimes when something was large enough to require silence. I think he knew, he said finally, about us. Even without meeting us, I think he wrote all those notebooks for us, not for himself. He was leaving directions, for children he couldn't get to yet. I thought about that, about a man on a lava field alone for 22 years, measuring and mapping and recording, talking to no one, believing in something no one else could see, not building it for himself, building it for 2 children he couldn't reach, leaving them a world to step into. Yes, I said, I think he did. We sat on the ridge as the stars came out, one by one, over the ancient rock. Below us in the dark, the water moved, patient and constant and absolutely certain of itself, the way things are certain when they have been waiting long enough. The valley had called it worthless for 60 years, but the water hadn't been listening. It had simply been there, under the sealed stone, under the silence, under all of it, waiting for someone stubborn enough to look. Let us know in the comments from which part of the world you are watching this video. If you're enjoying our videos, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.